Welcome to Bob Cargill's Marketing Show, a ridiculously awesome podcast bursting with insightful commentaries and intriguing conversations on the topics and issues that are on the minds of marketers, advertisers, social media, and PR professionals today. Hey everybody, this is Bob Cargill from Bob Cargill's Marketing Show. Hello, hope everybody's doing well. It's Friday, December 18, 2020. As we record today, this is episode 118. Love that. We're racking up the episodes. Very excited about that. Hope you're listening to all of them. Hey, there's snow on the ground. There's over a foot of snow on the ground. Came over yesterday and the night before it started, and we got hit hard here in Sudbury, Massachusetts. I don't know what the weather is like where you are listening, where you are watching, but I hope everyone's doing well. We're obviously well into the pandemic, hopefully about to put the pandemic in the rearview mirror. The vaccine's out there now, and over the next few months, we'll all be getting that vaccine, and we'll be getting vaccinated and getting back together in person. I can't wait. Sometime in 2021, probably about halfway through the year. Cannot wait for that. Happy holidays. Whatever holiday you are celebrating, whatever holidays you are celebrating, happy holidays and happy new year. Hey, I have a great guest with us today. Her name, Karen McFarlane. She is CMO and founder of K Media Partners and president of AMA New York. That's the New York chapter, the American Marketing Association. And that's the big thing we have in common. Karen and I are both, well, I am a past president. She's a current president, but we both, I've walked in the shoes she's walking in right now. We have AMA in common. Karen, thank you for being here today. Welcome. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm wicked excited to have you here, Karen. And I told you right back here, I have your name on my little cool sign, and you're the first podcast guest to have her or his name on that sign because it's a brand new sign. I hope it, it's one more way of me welcoming you to the Bob Cargill's Marketing Show. Hey, let's start with the way I start with everybody. I'm going to ask you to, I didn't read your bio or anything like that. I just said what you do, because I want you to drill down and tell viewers and listeners all about your career up to this point. You can give us all the details if you want, or just the elevator pitch, if you will, the 30-second version. Tell everybody about yourself.
Okay. I actually don't like this question, but I'm going to give it a try. So I have been in marketing for, 25 plus years. I stopped counting. Primarily, I almost exclusively work in the B2B side with tech firms, although, I do dabble outside of that industry from time to time. It can be anywhere from a startup or, a well-established business or enterprise. And I primarily deal with those large sale deals, those enterprise sale deals. I didn't start in B2B. I went to college. I thought I wanted to be in film and music. And so I majored in that area at NYU. And I think my goal was to be a producer. But, I quickly found out that through a bunch of internships, that might not be the life for me, although I still dabbled in it when I took my first job at HBO Home Video, which was in the entertainment business, right? But it was in the marketing side. So I kind of fell into marketing. And on the side, I always had these side businesses that was still in the entertainment industry or the music industry, because I still was excited by that, but I just didn't know how I was going to make a living off of it. And of course, especially back then in the 1990s, there's a lot of skepticism about how you make it in the music business, which I guess I fell into. But from there, I went from HBO. I started at it was a small startup called Bolt, and it was really one of the first social media networks for teens. So that was a very quick lesson, right, in what it meant to be in a very fast-paced environment, as opposed to being at HBO, which is, obviously more corporate and quote unquote normal in that sense. But I really wasn't happy at the startup. And so I left, right? I didn't have a job in sight. I just wasn't happy with the commute and the work that I was doing. And it took me about, 6 to 8 months, but then I started consulting. And it was the best thing ever, right? It just opened up a whole new world for me because I like to have a challenge, right? And when you go and you consult with different companies, you have to learn a new industry all the time. And so I got to put my marketing acumen into practice over and over again because I kept challenging myself over and over again every time I went to work with a new company. And so that was like my industry of choice, right? Was consulting, right? And I've done that pretty much since then, except for a small stint where I accepted a job where I was consulting for about 3 years. But after that, I came out and I decided to primarily focus on B2B. And I think that was in, I want to say 2011, 2007. I can't actually remember right now. So long ago. Right? But that's when I just started focusing on B2B tech.
In this B2B tech and this consulting you do, this is your own company. Is that correct, that you were founder of?
Yes, my own company, and I bring in very talented folks that specialize in other areas. And I'm actually working with a design boutique, and we're about to partner, right, probably in 2021, to merge our companies and form a boutique agency that offers full-scale marketing and design services.
That is exciting news.
It is exciting.
Are we the first to hear that publicly?
I've been talking about it a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, we were going
so it's
fast.
No secret.
No secret. No,
Yeah.
we were moving towards it very quickly in March, but then of course, the pandemic hit, so we kind of slowed down a little bit. So I think 2021 will be the year we can regroup and really push that forward. But we've been doing projects together this whole time, so it's just about formalizing the process.
2021 will be the year we all regroup and hopefully get back to normal business as usual. Hey, so Karen, telling us about your background, I realize, and I'm also recalling our conversation, I don't know, a month or two ago, other things we have in common besides AMA. So, I was maybe 15, 20 years ahead of you in New York City, but I too had dreams of the music business or entertainment. I went to Brooklyn College grad school, and in the early 80s, I worked at RCA Direct Marketing and Warner Brothers. And, but it was from a marketing advertising perspective. I could have gone in to television and film. That was one of my goals. Let's say I wanted to, but I got my first job out of grad school accidentally in direct marketing, meaning I had all this writing experience. So they hired me, and the rest for me, is history, lots of years of history. But the similarity,
very similar.
I was enamored with the bright lights, big city, and thought I'd be in entertainment and working in a high rise my whole career. And not so much. I fell into marketing, but I love marketing. And I applaud you for having your own business, because I had my own business in the 90s for 7 years, and now I have my own business again. To me, it's the best way to go. Be your own boss. Isn't it a great feeling to have that autonomy?
Goodness. Oh, yes. And, I had a great example. So my dad owned his own business, and eventually it sold a couple times, but eventually I think IBM has the IP now, right? But so I grew up in that environment of entrepreneurship from, I don't know, when I was little. I don't even remember. I used to work for him sometimes, begrudgingly, right? I didn't think that was interesting or fun. I remember when he talked to me about becoming more involved in the business. I was totally into the entertainment world, and I was like, no, what you do is boring. Well, what he did was B2B tech, right? When I think back. But at that time, that didn't resonate with me at all. I wanted to be, like you said, in the bright lights of everything. And so even when I was working at HBO, actually even before then, I think, or maybe whatever, around the same time, I had started my own business, was managing artists, right? And then that moved into starting an independent record label, right? And with my business partner. As a matter of fact, I actually need to do some research on this. But thinking back, we might have been one of the very first Black female-owned independent record labels
Wow.
in the industry.
Look at you. That's awesome.
Well, if we weren't the first, we were one of the first, right? So, but we didn't know what we were doing at that time. We were having a good old time, striking deals. We were doing a lot of bookings for artists at, various venues around the country. So I was doing all of this on the side while I was working at HBO. That was inconsistent income. I mean, when you're shopping an artist, you never know what's going to happen. And of course, the artists create all sorts of drama for you sometimes. But I was always working on my own business, even when I was, fresh out of college.
So you're entrepreneurial, and again, you and I have that in common. I've dabbled in a lot of different things over the years, but mainly, again, once I fell into marketing out of grad school, I've stuck to the same industry. I've just worked at a lot of different places, and now the second time I'm on my own and doing things like this podcast, because you can do things like this when you're your own boss. When I work for somebody else, and I loved all my bosses and jobs, but you didn't necessarily have the freedom. I want to talk about AMA specifically. We'll get that covered, and then we'll talk a little bit about marketing in general. I have a lot of questions for you in the next 30, 40 minutes. So excuse me if I cut you short in any time. I never mean to. It's just I want to make sure we cover a lot of ground. Let's talk about AMA, your role as president of AMA New York. How's it going? What's it like? What the challenges and highlights in the last 6 months? The pandemic especially. What has that done to the?
Well, I'm a past president and a current president because this is my second term. So
I did that too.
Around,
yeah.
You did that too? Okay.
I did 2 years. Yeah, and you're limited though. Only it's term limits.
I know, which is completely fine. I
guess maybe you can join another chapter somewhere, and
maybe you can try and start all over again, right? I don't know if I would do that, but
that means you're doing a good job if you're doing it for your second year in a row.
I think so. I hope so.
There was just no one else who was interested.
No, we had our president-elect and everything. Actually, what was nice about it was the president-elect, when we were talking about succession planning, was like, Karen, I think you should really do it again. I was like, oh, yeah, no. He's like, no. You should really do it again. We had a meeting with the executive committee, and I said I would think about it. It took me about a month to think about it, and then I came back and said yes. And that was right before the pandemic. So maybe I would have said no once COVID hit. But the second time around is much better. I think you get some traction after the first year, and you can really keep your agenda going, which I think is really nice. I think, the initial challenge was just around, I think as a board member, you have an understanding of how the organization works, but as president, there's just a completely different, level of responsibility that you have to wrap your head around and kind of figure out how you're going to make those improvements. And, when I started, one of the very first things that I wanted to do was make sure everyone had a voice, right? And that was really, really important to me because these are volunteers and they're sharing their time and talent and expertise, and you want to be able to cultivate that and give them the voice to do that. So it's a little bit of a culture shift that needed to happen, but we got through that successfully. And, then it was just kind of acting on programs that we thought were going to be, better for the AMA community, AMA New York community. And I was actually really happy that I was president when the George Floyd murder happened, because I really felt I was there on right time, right place, in the right role to be able to really kind of push through some initiatives, not only with AMA New York, but also for AMA in general. And for the past 6 months, in addition to obviously running the organization, which I said is a little bit easier given that I've done it a second year, and also a bunch of people we brought on in terms of new board members. They've had their first year, just, they've got their ground in. And, we're just leaning into our creativity at this point. It allowed me to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives from a marketing standpoint. And when you looked around, that really wasn't discussed in the past, or not too much. And so we had a real opportunity to explore how marketing can influence DEI from all the different pillars that it, essentially supports, in an organization, in any organization, no matter what it is. So that's been really exciting to kind of push through some of those types of initiatives on a national and local level.
Karen, I'm applauding. Kudos for you, to you. Not only did 2020, bring the pandemic, but it also surfaced these issues such as social justice and racism in this country, and diversity, equity, and inclusion are now things that every organization, company, institution, you name it, we all are paying attention to. And when you said right place, right time, you could say that again. And I know you're doing a ton for AMA New York as well as national. So that's where the applause comes in. And I'd love to hear more about it and tell, anyone watching, listening, not just AMA, with, regardless, at work, at home, what can people do? What should people, a lot of us have been finally saying things, the right things, but what action can we take to support DEI?
Yeah, I think, that's a really great question, and it differs depending on if it's personally or at work, but it all really kind of starts with really trying to have a cultural sensitivity to people and talking to people, right? Really understand what your own biases and preconceptions are, and try to throw them out the window and learn about the people around you, right? Also, don't ignore the conversations that you are hearing. Like, there are groups that have been complaining about different things for a very long time, right? I mean, when you talk about, diversity, equity, inclusion, diversity incorporates a lot of different groups, right? So it's, gender-based, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity. With the AMA, we focused on the BIPOC community. It's just a huge undertaking. And because of the George Floyd situation, we wanted to center people around a concept. So it was centered around centering and amplifying Black, Indigenous, and people of color voices, the BIPOC community. But a lot of these exercises can be used no matter what you're talking about. And so it really starts with a conversation. In the workplace, it really starts with the people that are part of your organization and where they sit in your organization, right? So take a look at your leadership. What does that look like? How many women are represented, right? How many women of color are represented? I mean, you can dive down into different areas, and having a seat at the table. And I love to say, it's okay to give people a seat at the table, but do they have the mic, right? So you don't want to put people there as, people are afraid of tokenism or window dressing. You really want to be thoughtful and intentional about curating diverse voices and empowering them across the organization. That's number one. And number two, when you think about your workforce, in terms of recruitment, you also have to look at the support systems. How are you promoting these people? What are your retention numbers look like? That's going to give you a sense of how you're building inclusive cultures, right? And that's super important for sustainability. And then as you do that, and you're working with those people in those groups, look at your stakeholders, look at everything, look at your systems, look at the products and services that you're offering. I'm in B2B, right? So it's harder to see, right? Brands, acting in the right way towards DEI. Some of these other companies you can see, like Nike's a great example, right? Like, what did they had that commercial, like, for once, don't do it, right? And they were talking about don't make excuses,
Yes.
Barbie had this, I just loved it. It was so cute. I just happened upon it. Barbie has this YouTube channel, where, the characters interact, and they had, I'm going to say white Barbie and black Barbie. I just don't know if those are the names really, right? But they had this conversation about different treatment that Black Barbie had, as opposed to white Barbie, right? So it was a really simple conversation that young people, that play with those toys could really comprehend and start that conversation.
Teaching opportunities.
Yes,
Hey,
exactly.
and you mentioned Nike a couple of years ago when Colin Kaepernick took a knee on behalf of social justice and I believe specifically, correct me if I'm wrong, against police brutality. He was the first and became I'm trying to think of the word, became associated, he pioneered, was the first to take a knee, and Nike did an ad about him, I believe, and stood by him. And I did a video. I do a lot of videos on YouTube, and I call it "Take a Stand Like a Big Brand" because Nike did, and so they're one of the big name companies that have had the guts to get behind this issue. Am I correct?
Yes. Yes. I mean, they fully embraced it and they fully leaned into their mission. And I think that's what companies need to do, right? In general, whether you're a B2C, D2C, B2B company, take a look at your mission, lean into it, especially if it's something that you stand for, and look for ways that you can create that type of inclusive environment. When you think about B2B, as I mentioned earlier, it's not something that you can outwardly see as a consumer, right? Because of, just the nature of the industry. But, again, you look at your team and your employees. You look at your thought leaders. How diverse are they, in terms of panel discussions and speakers and content that's being put out. You look at your surveys and your ad campaigns and your target market, right? Like typically in B2B, the primary demo is a white male, right? But we know that we're selling to a diverse group of people. So, you have to look at those processes or those campaigns and those efforts and see if there's barriers that you're not quite seeing. And the way that you're going to see them is when you bring in other people, because they're going to have a different viewpoint.
A different lens.
Yes. And that's where you'll see gaps and opportunities.
It's, am I right? It can be very complicated and probably daunting for those who haven't been there, done that. And that's probably more than less. Organizations, this is new ground. And it's challenging. And are there enough people such as yourself who are capable, like yourself, of initiating this within organizations? Or do these organizations, I hope you know what I'm saying, do they have the capabilities themselves, or do they need to go out and recruit, say, diversity officers or people who have this experience? And I would think that would be people of color, indigenous people, people that reflect that which the company should be reflecting going forward.
I mean, I think it's twofold, right? I think that, yes, having a chief diversity officer is super important. And what's their role, right? It's about exploring and helping them companies uncover the gaps and opportunities, right? They're not going to fix it alone, though, right? So it's a cultural shift that needs to happen.
Yep.
And that shift needs to happen from the top, right?
Yep.
So one of the initiatives that we're working on with the AMA, that I'm spearheading, is curating a group of executive marketers, right? That we can talk to about what their challenges are, their barriers, and potentially how the AMA, either at a chapter level or a national level, or maybe AMA is not a vehicle for them, but how we can support them in advocating across their organization for DEI and help to spearhead that cultural shift.
I love how you articulate this a lot better than I am trying to articulate and summarize what you're saying. But the word curate, I love, and you're picking, selecting, finding. I think all that means curate.
Yeah.
The people who can have the capabilities, as I was saying, to make sure, and we're talking specifically about AMA, but I also wanted to broaden this because our audience is people of all kinds in marketing, so that organizations, companies, institutions, nonprofits, commercial, B2B, B2C, anywhere, anyone, that there's the diversity at the top on down that is commensurate with the diversity in this country.
Yeah.
That again, it's probably a simplistic way of summarizing, but right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's something we should have done a long time ago.
Of course, so, we could talk about that for ages, but at least we're doing something now. I mean, I think it was encouraging for me to see, and this happened before George Floyd, that CEOs were signing the CEO Action Pledge, right? Which was, commitment for, having inclusive workforces. And I think the number's up to, when I last looked, maybe 1,400 CEOs, and which I think impacted maybe 13 to 15 million employees. I mean, that's pretty huge to have that commitment. And so, that's great. And now what does that look like throughout the organization? Every organization is different, right? But you're going to have your senior leadership buy into this and help that trickle down effect. I mean, some of the things that I've, it's hearing, you have a lot of people who do care about this, right? But they don't know where to take it within the organization.
That's a big part of what I was saying earlier. They have no idea where to begin. You do, and I know there are others like yourself who are have all the resources and knowledge. Where do those companies start if they're looking around at each other and throwing their hands up in the air?
Well, again, it's like, it depends on the organization. There's one client that I have, I think they're doing some really cool things. So one, they've started something, I think they call it like community pairs, right? So they're starting with community pairs, right?
Community
I think that's
pairs.
what they call it.
Yep.
So they took a look at, their employee base, and they're from all over. And so they've paired people with each other to have conversations with each other, right? So you're just getting to know people in a different light, right? And they also do like a weekly 10-minute stand-up meeting, which is hosted by a different person in the company every single week, which also gives you another layer or another touch point to get to know people, more than just an email or a quick Zoom, official Zoom meeting, right? It's a more personal approach. So that's something they're doing internally, along with some other goals that they have around, creating a diversity statement and surveying, and really just diving into what that means within their culture. So they're trying to make a cultural shift, right? And also what they're doing is they're partnering with organizations and HBCUs to make sure they're building a pipeline, right, into their organization for people of color, right? Because they looked at that data and that they saw that there's a gap there. I also have a friend that works for a very huge company. I can't really name them, but everybody knows them. And they're taking a look at their hiring practices, right? So they thought they had a very good hiring practice that got you in and out the door pretty quickly, and it didn't. One of the key benefits of it is it didn't compare candidates to each other. It just put them through a cycle. Whoever made it through the cycle first, got the job. But the breakdown in that is the network, right? Most of the people that come in are through referrals. And if your employee base is of one group, then that's what's going to come through the door, right? So there's a breakdown in that process.
It perpetuates itself. The
cycle, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So, that's, when you have a huge organization, like just what I mentioned, there are so many different pockets that you have to explore, right? In order to see if the system is excluding people, and then break down those barriers that have probably existed for maybe decades, right? So that's a tough job to do, versus maybe a smaller company like the other one that I'm mentioning, which it's pretty big, but it's smaller, that is taking a fresh look as in their growth plan, right, around how they can proactively incorporate diversity and create better connections across the organization.
Are you available to mentor or for hire to help companies do what we're talking about? Is that part of
Absolutely.
what you are? Is that part of your job right now? Your
It's not
consulting?
part of, I'm so glad you asked that question. It's not part of my job today, but it is 2021, right? As
Love
I
it.
have
Love it. Yeah,
being
I'm thinking
involved
we
in this
need
work.
people like
Yeah,
you, Karen. And I would think, we need 1,000, if that's possible. You need to clone yourself 1,000 times over and go all over the country, one state at a time, one city at a time, one company at a time. Make sure they're doing what we're talking about. I would think it's a monumental task, but maybe once it starts, then it perpetuates itself in a good way, in the way we're talking about.
completely. And I'm working on a system just like that, like really key, because it hasn't really been talked about before, how marketing can influence DEI, right? And so I've been researching, exploring this, and using my 25 years of experience, 25 plus years of experience, to cultivate, like, I don't know, process or action plan around this. Obviously, you have to be customized for every company based on what they are, but all these different touch points. And I think that there are areas that people don't necessarily think about all the time, right? I mean, it's down to, like, again, in B2B, your channel partnerships, right? But if you just think about partnerships in general, who are you partnering with? And are you perpetuating certain cycles, or are you opening your doors? So, just having that different perspective and galvanizing the troops to do that and giving everyone a voice. At the end of the day, it comes right back to that same concept, is giving people a voice and trying not to, shut people down or exclude them, keep them out, right? So that's what's really important in the effort.
Yeah, I feel like I'm watching, a national news show, and listening to the number one expert on this topic. I'm telling you, we need your voice to be heard more often and louder and clearer, in so many areas. AMA is one thing, but then let's get you, out into the bigger world, and like I say, clone yourself and let's solve this problem. It's so important. It's sad, and it truly does sadden me that we're talking about this kind of thing. I think we all wanted in the past to think, we had outgrown this and we were better than this. I guess the mixed blessings that it all has surfaced, because maybe, and I hope, my heart, crossing my fingers, saying my prayers, I'm hoping, this is the beginning of the end of these issues, that people like you will help us solve this problem, and we will be able to put, racism in the rearview mirror.
It's definitely a marathon. It took us 400 years to get here, so it's going to take a little while to get out of it. But you know what? The good part today is that people are willing to have the conversation. They're open to it. And I think that makes it a lot easier for everyone to get to that end goal. So,
Well,
yeah.
I want to, maybe not today, because we could talk forever, but we can keep talking about this, but it will never be able to cover it all. Meaning, what I'm trying to say is I want to continue this conversation anytime. Karen, I'm available, and I want to take action, and I want to see the people around me take action. Every organization, every company, personally, professionally, this country. I mean, it's been a particularly tough 4 years. Frankly, I'm very optimistic as of January 20.
Yes.
Yay.
You too.
We've all breathed a sigh of relief. We won't go there. We don't have to get too detailed about politics, but I think we're going to have a good, as of January 20, things are going to be brighter, and hopefully we can tackle these issues. And like you say, it's not going to happen overnight. And sure, I'm like everybody else. We want this, quick, immediate solution. No, I know that's not going to happen, and it's going to be a lot of work to do.
Of course.
For all of us.
For all of us. And just, I know we're going to move on to a different topic, but I just have to say that, this is why representation is so important, because seeing, Kamala Harris, right, as being,
yes,
second most powerful woman, person who happens to be a woman and a woman of color in the White House is incredibly inspiring. And, obviously Barack Obama was incredibly inspiring when, he became president, but just to see more of those things really changes the fabric of our nation. And so I just needed to say that, because as a woman of my age, I am still as giddy.
Well, you better believe I am, and you don't know me that well, but it's very evident on social media where my politics lean, and who was probably endangering themselves because of COVID, but who was out on the streets of Boston the day Joe and Kamala were announced winners, but me and my wife were, along with hundreds of others, dancing in the streets. We were wearing our masks and keeping social distance, but I'll never forget it. We danced in the streets.
I was dancing at the restaurant I went to, so yeah. It was like, sit down. I'm like, no.
No, so this is, hey, we can cover all this territory, Karen.
Yes.
This is, I not only can we, I want to. It's a marketing show, but we can talk about anything, and this does affect everything we do, personally, professionally, work-wise. If these companies, so I've done a couple of videos, at least one specifically on this, but generally this idea have talked about before, win-win, take a stand, address these important issues. Am I not correct that not only is it the right thing to do, it will probably help their business over time, because this country has changed, people. It's 2020, it's going to be 2021, and look all around you, and it's not what it was 30 years ago. You want to be more successful. Number one, you should change and do the right thing. Number two, it's going to help your bottom line. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. I think there's like a McKinsey report or something that said that for every, hopefully I'm quoting this right, like for every 10% increase you have in your racial and ethnic diversity, your earnings go up, I think 8%. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Anyway, but the main point is, right, at the end of the day, companies are in it to make money, right? And they're going to focus their attention on things that drive revenue. You can't get away from that fact. And so that's why it's really important to put measures around these things, because that's where they're going to, put their budget, right? And their time and effort. So it's not only a feel-good thing, to your exact point, it is a revenue driver. And particularly for, I think where you can see it most clearly in these B2C companies, when you're ignoring entire markets, right? If you are just focused on one monolithic, group. And also, they need to get to know the other markets, because even though I am a Black female, right? I don't represent all Black females in America. Actually, my parents are from Jamaica, right? So I have a different experience, right, in terms of the Afro-Caribbean side versus, Black American side, traditional Black American side. And so, it goes back to the heart of marketing, which is understanding your customer.
Yes.
Right?
Love that. No, your audience is key. If there is no audience, doesn't matter how good your products and services are. I think the audience is probably the most important part of the equation. You said something that got me thinking, and I started it by saying it's good for business. The Boston Red Sox, my hometown team here, I'm in Sudbury, and Boston's just 40 minutes away. I've been a Red Sox fan my whole life. I'll tell you a personal quick story, because when I said I've been taking a stand myself personally, my actions, speak. I put my actions where my words are, if that's the right expression. The Boston Red Sox, on this big banner outside Fenway Park this year, put up a huge sign along the Mass Pike that said Black Lives Matter. And I quickly um, praised them for that. And on Facebook, went within days and took a big picture. You know, I wanted to see it and put it up on Facebook. It was my cover photo on Facebook for a while. Because of politics and some of the issues going on in the world, you know, not everybody agreed with them putting up such a big sign, and I was surprised, but perhaps I should have known better that on Facebook, you know, there was some people who said, "Oh, that shouldn't encroach into the sport or into, you know, a baseball team's marketing, if you will."
Mm-hmm.
And I disagree, and I think you and I are going to be on the same page. But you can explain it better than I can. Why should it matter to the Red Sox? Why should it matter to Nike? I think we've already said it, but can you articulate that for some of my? I have 1,400 friends on Facebook. They're not everybody's going to agree. But for those who didn't agree with me, that hey, that we should have that big, you know, billboard, and that hey, I'm happy to see the players taking a knee because I know why they're doing that. Can you explain to those who don't understand?
So here's the thing. At the end of the day, I mean, Black Lives Matter became controversial because people don't really understand the message that, you know, it was portraying, right? It's this grassroots movement that has become so incredibly powerful and a unifier across the nation. But I venture to say, if you put anything else in front of, you know, if you took out the word Black and you put something else there, no one would complain about it, right? It's because it is rooted in what has been a very divisive construction, because race is a social construct, right, for the past 400 years. So that's why it gets, you know, all this negative attention. But if we go back to, you know, these principles of marketing, which is you have to focus on your customer. You create things, right? Every brand creates things for people, right? And what we are trying to do is tap into people's emotions and connect with them, right? It's very customer centric. And so we've known this for a while, but what this movement and George Floyd's murder and all the different things, even the pandemic, has bubbled to the very top, right? Is that customers want to do business with brands that care about them, right? And so you have to demonstrate that, and it has to be authentic. It can't just be a moment, right? It can't just be throwing money at an organization. It has to be lived throughout your organization. That's when we go back to leadership and culture, so that all of those things can filter out to, you know, through everything that you do, through the ad campaigns, through the products that you create, you know. Just to give a really quick example, Dove Beauty, right?
Yep.
Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad with their messaging, but no one's perfect. So it's all good, right? At the end of the day. But maybe you haven't noticed because you don't have black hair, right? But they've created a line of products, right, that is now for hair like mine. That didn't exist before, right? And I don't know the inner workings of their organization, but I have to believe that they took a look at the market and they saw that, you know, Black women, I don't remember the number, but the amount that we spend on hair is like ridiculous, right? Because we'll do whatever we have to do to get our hair done. And so they took a look at the market and they saw they had this gap. They took a look at their customers and saw that they weren't being inclusive, right? And so they're taking advantage of that. Now, what I like about what they're doing is that they're really leaning into that in terms of really trying to connect with what is important about me and my hair and the challenges that I'm having, but also these other conversations, versus a company like Band-Aid, for instance, when the whole Aunt Jemima controversy came out, right? Let's just make some flesh-colored Band-Aids.
Yeah, they were in the news, yep.
You weren't doing that before. It wasn't important to you before. We were still there. Yep. Right? Flesh is not our flesh. We know this already. So it becomes inauthentic. I know if you really want to connect with your customers, you're going to have to get to know them. You're going to have to get to know them very specifically in terms of their culture, their desires, their needs, their challenges that are specific to them. And you're going to have to lead with empathy. And that is why you see some of these brave companies leaning in to that type of messaging, right? And we just have to keep watching to see how they back that up. It's just not just support, but it comes to the action of their products and services.
I asked you the question because I knew you could articulate it, say it, encapsulate it a lot better than I could. Everything you just said, ditto. It started with the Red Sox, and yes, I applaud the Red Sox for that big billboard, and everything I've seen is they are backing up, that billboard with their actions, as are a number of other companies. I'm gonna slightly segue, not a ton, because everything we're talking about still is obviously related to marketing and business. So that topic is still on the table. Okay. I'm going to back you up on Dove. Corroborate. It's funny you mention them, not for the reason you mentioned them, but I have seen them do some good advertising. One in particular that I cited during the pandemic. So maybe we talk a little bit about marketing during the pandemic. They did an ad about washing your hands, and it was a quick ad, and it said, what are you doing? Something like in the next 20 seconds, you should be washing your hands. This was the beginning of the pandemic when everyone was being advised, it was new to everybody. Wash your hands, wear a mask, social distance. I loved a line they had in this ad, and I've talked about this before. They said, we don't care what soap you use, just wash your hands. And that got my attention. I've seen them in the news before for good advertising. So I'm really glad. I did not know about the example you gave. Now I have another case study, if you will, to look into and maybe cite in future presentations. Thank you for pointing that out. And it's stories like that you need to continue to point out, because again, we're not all the same, but we all have so much shared experiences, and we're all in this together. We need to realize we maybe more the same than we think, and but we need to trade stories. And so I'm glad you traded that story. During the pandemic, how has that affected your business, and for better or worse? And how do you see marketing changing in the last 6 to 8 months, pandemic, and do you think those changes will stick? So that's a big open-ended question.
Big question. Okay, so for my business, it definitely slowed down, right? So especially in the beginning, right? Because I think we were all in this holding pattern to see what would happen, with the pandemic. When would we go back to work? How is this affecting things? And so everything kind of just slowed down a little bit. It didn't dry up, but it was just slowed down in terms of activity. Like, should we be marketing? Do people even care, right? And people didn't, for the most part, depending on what it was. And then, especially for, I think with B2B, right? Business has to continue, right? So once people got some level of comfortability, I think the whole work from home thing kind of threw a lot of organizations for a loop. How is that going to work, right? Because, it's in my view, it's been a slow adoption. There's still some legacy of, you have to be with each other all the time. And there's definitely benefits to that. I'm not knocking that. But in some cases, there was still this reluctance to allow people to work from home because they didn't think they would be productive, right? There was a productivity concern with that. But once companies started to adjust and people started to adjust their home lives and getting back to work, and also probably being thankful that they had a job, right? Because as we went further into the pandemic, there's more devastation that was happening. You saw companies really do what I think American companies can do best, is innovate, right? They had to pivot, and they had to do it fast, right? And so I think that that challenge I kind of talked about a lot earlier when I was talking about why I like to consult, right? You're in this new industry. Now these companies and people had to really kind of think through how they're going to do something differently. And in some cases, they found better ways. Right? And maybe some things aren't that great anymore. But now you're going to see people asking questions like, do we really need to meet in person? Right? I think when we come out of the pandemic, there's still going to be a lot of that. Oh, we can meet, but then we're going to kind of settle back, right, into,
Yep.
We could do it a different way this time,
Mm-hmm.
right? They found new channels or ways to better optimize those channels because they were focused on it, right? You couldn't
Mm-hmm.
do live events anymore, and there's a whole lot of things that go into doing live, and I'm talking about on a B2B side. Putting on a live event, showing up to a live event, optimizing that live event, right, for your funnels. But now they're virtual events, and you have to reinvent what that looks like. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a bit of a rocky road. But now you're optimizing these online digital channels in a completely different way and using your time probably more efficiently and more productively than you would have.
In those online events, so yeah, a lot of people, myself included, might find them more difficult to pull off and maybe more exhausting, ironically, doing things
Yes.
on Zoom. You'd think it'd be easier. It's not, and it can be innovating. But the upside is a lot of these big conferences that you might not have been able to afford or travel to, now everything's accessible to everybody for less. And yeah, that I would think would stick post-pandemic. We will realize that, wow, it's accelerated the pace of technology. I mean, in the embracement, if you will, of the embracing of technology. People now realize all the good that technology can bring. And yeah, we don't want to over rely on it. In person in most cases is better, but using technology is sometimes cheaper, sometimes more scalable. And certainly in this busy, fast-paced, crowded world, it's going to make sense, I think, going forward.
Oh yeah, definitely in some cases. And I think it just means you have to make a business case, right, for how you're going to approach the various different channels that you're using, right? In person versus online. Obviously, there's still some wonderful advantages to being with people, right? The nonverbal is so important.
Right.
The camaraderie, the networking. But it's just about thinking through that more strategically instead of it just being something that you just do because you did it before.
Hey, have you seen, so we mentioned Dove. Are there any other, we mentioned Nike, I mentioned the Boston Red Sox. I don't want to forget to ask this question. Any of the brands that you look up to for their advertising and marketing, and that could be pandemic or not, for whatever reason?
Whatever reason. So just in terms of the pandemic, I'm sorry. I actually was watching like a lot of CNN during the pandemic.
As do I. I'm a CNN fan.
And I really became, I was just watching it because it was news. I didn't think of myself as a fan of CNN or anything. I just happened to watch it. But when they started doing ads around the masks, right, and it not being a political statement, when they're really focused on, it seems, helping people understand what they need to do around the pandemic. I know there's a lot of other political conversation happening. When it comes to the pandemic itself, right, I really feel like they're very concerned about their audience. That's how it comes off to me. And asking important questions, holding these town halls, having these ads, they're using all of their mechanisms to get the word out about how we can be safe and healthy. And any brand that is using their the power of their might, right, to do that, I actually their platform, thank you, I look up to, because it's so important right now with all the other noise.
You brought up a great point, and it's something I've talked about before, and it's something any marketer should be aware of, and it ties back to what we were saying earlier when we were talking about diversity and inclusion and equity. You need to know your audience, and your audience right now is suffering, is struggling, You need to show empathy. CNN does do that. I know what you mean. Any leader should be doing that. Any company should be doing that. And if we talk about marketing per se, empathy is more important than ever. And there's another something that probably has surfaced in the last 6-8 months that is going to stick, I think.
Yes.
And I like that change. I think businesses, I think brands, marketers, advertisers have seen the light, if you will, that, they need to be human. People do business with people, and we need to be sensitive as business people to our employees, to our colleagues, and to our customers. And it's a win-win because everybody's happier, and frankly, everyone is going to do more business with one another because they're going to like each other more and respect each other more. And what could be better than that?
Yeah. And I think the real winner too in this whole thing, I mean, at the end of the day, is small businesses too, because they do that best, right? That empathy,
Yep.
play, whatever, I don't want to call it a play, but they do that best. People feel very connected to those businesses in their community. And throughout this pandemic, what has been really heartwarming to see are just local, the neighbors really just purposefully wanting to support businesses. They were not, maybe they weren't thinking about it as heavily before, but now they're like rallying around their local businesses, not so much the big box brands, right, or retailers, but their local community. And I think that's very heartwarming, and that's going to stick.
I agree. And the big box brands, the behemoths of business need to beware that is a trend. And so they can look at the small businesses and the mom and pop stores and say, hey, we need to be like them, even though we're giant, and we need to be more personal than impersonal, more personable than promotional. The human side of business is more important than ever. Karen, I do a lot of social media. I think that's part of my consulting gig. I'm a copywriter, I'm a teacher, and I'm a social media practitioner. Do you use social media personally, or do you help your clients with it? And tell us about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So I personally am not a social media expert, right? I bring in some wonderful people that know how to work those channels and tools right better than I do. I personally I'm on all the platforms really, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I probably use Facebook the most. That's my friends and family. So, and then other than that, I think LinkedIn is probably my second most used tool. But I'm now into TikTok just from a purely pleasure standpoint,
As am I. I might have even put up a video earlier today on TikTok.
Oh, I'm going to have to find you, discover you. Okay.
I'm not hard to find. Under my name, and I started using it in the spring because, all the talk, and again, I do social media for a living. I can't not say I don't use TikTok. So I definitely like, it's fun. But I am using it for business, for my personal brand. You'll see if you do look me up. I'm going to. I'm trying to.
All the time now.
Yeah, well, we'll see each other. I'm repurposing, if you will, some of my motivational videos and putting them up there with some background music. It's kind of fun. And I also put my wife and I partnered on a few. She has a sense of humor in the family, so we've staged a few funny little clips, I think.
I love it.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'll get there. Right now I'm just like the voyeur and watching, and
it's fun.
Sharing them with everyone. But the problem with TikTok for me is it's at least an hour, probably an hour.
You get sucked into it.
Yeah. So I turn the notifications off because I'm just like, I can't. But then people will send me things that I need to see, and then I'm just drawn right back in. So that's the only negative with it. But I just actually love the platform.
But here's something, again, I try to connect the dots on this show and in life in general. The business, I can't tell you how many people tell me, oh, I don't have time for that, or it's silly, or, it's just a bunch of these kind of videos. And I say, yeah, but you got to pay attention to a big, if this is your business, if you're a
Yeah.
marketer, you got to pay attention to these trends. And there's something to be learned, from TikTok. It's fast paced, it's entertaining, it's sense of humor. I mean, maybe that will work even with your B2B clients,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
people that may be tired of always being so serious and uppity and, you know what I mean,
100%.
stodgy, whatever the right words are. Let's let our hair down and have some fun.
No,
And that
you're
may
right. I
sell.
mean,
That may sell more products.
it might sound like, you're right. I mean, right now it's fun, but I'm digesting it, right? Like the wheels are always turning in my mind. Like, how could this be used for a client or something like that, which is like, B2B tech. Like, how is that going to work?
I
right?
know
So,
it's a stretch. Yes.
it's a stretch, but maybe not. It's just I haven't figured it out yet because I haven't put enough brain power behind it because I'm too busy laughing at what's going on TikTok.
But
But no,
repurposing,
everything is everything. Yeah.
you could take quite easily, because this is what I do for clients. I say, hey, we've created this video. How can we slice and dice it and put it, everywhere?
Yeah.
You never know where you're going to get that big bang for the buck. I'll tell you, on TikTok, there's a lot of engagement. Like when Instagram started, and still to this day, Instagram has a lot of engagement. So you just never know. It's like fishing. You want to fish where the fish are. As a business, I'm not doing it for any of my clients right now, but I think
Just
there are
experiment.
lessons to be learned from using it that may be able to be used elsewhere. Those learnings.
That's how it all starts, right? You have to play around with it and just kind of figure out, how you can best maximize it. And like I really was at one point, and I think I was just being a little. I needed to just focus on it being fun. Was trying to see it from the strategic point of view only, and I wasn't experiencing it as a user when I first got on it. I said, forget that. I'm just going to experience it as a user for a while and see what comes to me through that. So that's kind of the methodology. I personally, as I said, like I have a wonderful team that is very focused on social media and also SEO, right? Because
Yeah.
I
Oh, yeah.
believe those are
SEO is critical.
very specialized skill sets
Yep.
that you must stay on top of 24/7. And so I don't purport to be myself, but I surround myself with talent, right? That is going to bring all those ideas to the table so that, we're building a strategy for that client that is, end to end and considers all of those elements. But if you ask me specifically about, how to leverage one of those, right? It obviously is different for every client, but I'm going to be 100% honest by saying, I need to bring my team in here, and that's how we're going to talk about it.
Well, you surround yourself like any good leader with good people, and these are all complementary parts of the whole, if you will. And
Yes.
yeah,
I read this book some time ago. I'm actually going to reread it to see if it's still true for me. But it's called "Go Discover Your Strengths," and really the concept was, especially as an adult, you have 5 key strengths that you can actually focus on. You can't be good at everything, right? So focus on what you're good at.
Yep.
Complement yourself with people who can complement your weaknesses, right? Bolster.
Totally. Yep.
And so that resonated with me, and that's really what I have done throughout, since I read that book so many years ago. And actually, I have a goal to reread that book to just kind of reevaluate what my strengths might be, at this later age. But that was the core concept, and I tell that to my 17-year-old son too. When we're talking about, college and work, I'm like, listen, you don't have to be good at every single subject. I don't care what anybody says. You're not going to use half of it. But places where you find joy and you find that you have a natural talent, lean all the way into those and seek support from the other ones. You'll be fine.
You're clearly is great a mother as you are a business person, Karen, and human being. I've learned so much from talking to you. We've covered the gamut. I'm going to ask you one more question, and that is, do you see what would you predict for 2021? And you can go further if you want in our field, marketing, and it could, relate to any of the issues we've covered today. And it's an open-ended question. What do you see the future?
I think what's
Looking
going to
like?
be interesting to explore, right, is, you know, we've been there's been this focus obviously on like data, right? Data analytics, you know, and essentially converting people to data points, right? But now, so that we can analyze, resell, you know, hopefully personalize and all that. But now we see this huge shift with this need for human connection and empathy, right? That's what customers want. And so I think what's going to be really interesting for 2021 and beyond is how do you marry those two, right? How do you take that data, but personalize it in such a way that it delivers on the empathy and the connection that your audience craves from you, right? And that converts into real revenue, right? So the data allows you to do some of that at scale. And that's why we're collecting it at every endpoint. But it also takes away some of that one-to-one,
Yeah.
you know, that customers need. So I think that's going to be the challenge going forward, because we've proven these 2 points out and now we need to bring them together. So it's going to be interesting to do that. I think B2B has like a head start on that to some degree, you know, and so to see maybe the, you know, B2C customers will take a cue from that. I mean, D2C brands probably actually are in that nice middle ground where they can kind of pick up on that. I mean, you know, these companies have exploded during the certain companies have exploded during the pandemic, you know, like HelloFresh or Lens Direct, which I think might be going public, right? Because people couldn't go to the stores and do things in the traditional way, but they provided a service that was meaningful and personal to them, or like a Warden Parker who's customizing the glasses for you. So there's definitely lots of examples out there in market, and I think we're just going to have to move more closely to that with speed and with innovation and with a diverse group of people behind leading the way.
Yes. Not even a question. A great way to wind things down by putting a punctuation mark on the importance of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And I'm so glad we covered that topic during today's conversation. And you're an expert in that topic, Karen. And I want people to be able to reach out to you if they are watching and listening and say, as they should, hey, Karen's the expert in this, Karen's the expert in that. Where can people find you? How do they reach out to you?
Sure. So my website is kmediapartners.com, Kaye, mediapartners.com. And I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me, Karen McFarlane, and I'm on Twitter as well and Instagram. So same names. You just plug my name in and you see my picture. You can find me.
Karen, we just met, I think, a few months ago, thanks to AMA. And I know we're going to continue this conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion and marketing and everything you're doing as a consultant down there in New York, right? You're in New York City, Manhattan, where I long time ago, that was my stomping ground, early 80s. I lived in Brooklyn, worked in Manhattan for a couple of years. I have fond memories of where you are living and working now. But anyways, I digress. Thank you so much, Karen, for everything.
No, thank you for having me. It was so much fun. I'd love to come back anytime.
Yeah, well, I'll have you back anytime. And I know even if we're not doing a podcast, we're going to continue this conversation.
Yes.
Have a great weekend. Happy holidays to you and your family.
Happy holidays to you and all your listeners.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, listeners and watchers, viewers. This has been Karen McFarlane, my guest, CMO of K Media Partners and the current president of the American Marketing Association New York chapter. This has been Bob Cargill with Karen McFarlane as my guest, Bob Cargill's Marketing Show. I want to thank all of you for watching and listening on to my podcast and on YouTube and wherever you are listening and watching this show. Karen, thanks again. Appreciate it. Thanks, listeners. Thanks, viewers. We will talk to you again soon.